All right. Um, First thing on the agenda this morning is to go over our 1.8 goals, and then we're gonna start doing some planning for 1.9. Oh, and first thing, actually, could I get a volunteer to take notes?
I can take notes for the first 30 minutes, but then I have a hard stop for the release burn down meeting.
Cool.
Yeah, we're gonna
I
have
will.
to go.
Sorry, what?
I'm going to have to go to that as well, obviously.
Okay. I can take over after the first 30 minutes.
Okay. And Elsie, Dan Kahn from CNCF here. Caleb asked us to, Lucas and myself, to come on and show a quick preview of the dashboard that we've been building for the steering group, really for the whole community. And I apologize for pressing, but I have a hard stop in half an hour as well. And I was wondering if maybe we could go second or third.
Yeah, actually, Dan, do you want to go first?
That would be great, actually, if you don't mind. I apologize for it. I don't
Absolutely.
mean to hijack it, but it is actually meant to be really fast to kind of raise awareness, and then we're very happy to come back in future meetings and get your impression on it.
Absolutely.
So I just pasted into the agenda the URL, and let me paste it in.
I'll stop sharing, and then you can share your screen.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just looking where the chat window is in, there it is. Complicated UI. New chats. No, I'm generally, can you, oh, there it is. Chat. Sorry, that's the URL that I'm looking for. And now I choose share screen. Sorry, just one more second. And that, it is not showing. One more second. So Brian Grant and other members of the leadership team made a request almost a year ago now, I believe, to try and have better insight into what's going on, what's working and not in the project. And there's been a couple different efforts at it. And now CNCF has thrown its hat in the ring. So there's this URL, cncftest.io, and the data's live. And so I definitely encourage you to spend some time here. But as an example, if I go into PRs merged, and folks can see that, right, Elsie?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we can see.
And, okay, thanks. And so what's pretty amazing about Grafana is that if I then want to zoom in specifically and see what's happened in the last few months, I can drag across that, and it's extremely responsive about zooming in and responding to that data. And then the other piece that I just want to point out is up here at the top left where I have week. We've now merged these graphs together using this Grafana feature. So if I say quarter, actually I need to reset that first. So first if I say PR comments, let's see here if I can, how I can reset. But the process is kind of interesting that in order to get the data, it's not sufficient to just go to the GitHub API and ask it for the latest results, because we actually want to see changes over time. And so instead, we're using this free data set they make available called GitHub Archives. And we actually download every single public action that anyone has done on GitHub in the last 3 years. Then we filter through that and throw out everything that's not Kubernetes related. And then we parse that data, dump it into a Postgres database. Then we analyze the Postgres and move it over to InfluxDB. And then this is a Grafana front end that's doing live calls on the InfluxDB in order to display this data. And so it's seemingly inefficient, and yet it actually only takes a couple hours to throw out all of that useless data. and then we're rerunning it every hour on the latest updates and updating all of our values as a result of this. So this is a very actively, Lucas, who's a contract developer for CNCF, is working on this full time right now. And all of his work is publicly available. And I'll just put that URL here as well. And we would love to get suggestions and comments and improvements. There's a doc that Brian Grant put together, which are essentially his wish list of everything that he would like to have done, all the visibility that he wants. But I think, as you'd imagine, as he sees individual graphs, he says, oh, that's not quite right. I need the 15th and 85th percentile. I need this data or that. And so it's naturally just going to be an iterative process. But part of the idea here, and I should also mention, this is actually based on the velodrome work that originally came out of Google. But part of the idea here is that because everything's open source, any of you can fork the repo, download the parse data, so you don't have to do all that heavy parsing that we've done, and then make improvements or suggestions and return them as pull requests. And so our aspiration is that this actually becomes a community project, and as other folks find issues they're looking at, that they can find views that will address it. So I think that's everything I wanted to show here. Could I answer any questions on it, or does Lucas, who's actually the developer on it, is there anything I left out that you want to add?
Is Lucas the sole point of contact for this at the moment?
Really, if you could open an issue on the GHA 2DB is the best place. I'm very actively involved with him as well. And I'll be following everything on that site.
There was also another question in chat about how the company affiliation is being done, or if it's being done.
It is. So this is a ton of work that was done. Lucas, what was the URL for that, please? It was under Git2DM, right?
Yes, exactly. Company affiliations were taken from a separate project. It was under CNCF, Git-DM fork, and there was for another project like who writes Kubernetes, and I just imported data from that repository.
Yeah,
so, exactly.
Right. But the thing that I want to emphasize is we actually believe that we have better data on company affiliation than has ever been created before, where we went through and analyzed over 1,000 unknown email addresses and matched them to LinkedIn or GitHub or other kinds of sources. And I'm sure there's some errors in there, but it was a very legitimate attempt to try and be comprehensive. And it also includes dates associated with it. So the analysis does try and actually track job changes over time. But all of that data is publicly available in the Git-DM repo. And we had made a call to the steering group and said, okay, we're going to call out to the Kubernetes dev and say, please look at this list and make sure that you and your coworkers appear here the way you think they should. And we got pushback from several folks saying, we don't really like this work. We think it's biased in the wrong way, of focused just on commits and not enough on all the other actions that really matter, like reviews and issues and documentation, other sorts of things. And so we said, okay, we'll put that Git-DM work on hold, go focus on the dashboard. And now we're pulling it into the dashboard piece, but trying to make it more part of a holistic view on the project.
I think that looks amazing. As somebody who's also tried to take a stab at this and have seen several other iterations at stabs at this, I think that looks awesome. Thank you so much for your work.
Oh, thank you. And it really is a work in progress. So, I mean, my main call for this group and for your colleagues is that in the next month or so, if you can go in and the more specific you can be about, oh, you need a graph that does X, or, oh, this graph isn't as useful as it could be because this data is wrong, we really do want to try to be very responsive.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and would be great if anybody wants some specific graph, also include some directions. How exactly can I extract this data from from GitHub, for example, some kind of labels or maybe texts or bot comments or something like this. If I have clear directions how to get this, I can deliver a graph very fast. That's all.
Okay, thanks so much for letting us go first, Elsie.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Lucas.
Actually, can I be on the rest of the call? I just want to listen for.
Absolutely.
No, we're kicking you out. You're done.
Okay, so yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. This is tremendous work.
Okay. So now on to the second item of business for today, which is reviewing the 1.8 plan. I feel like we have already started talking about this, but identify metrics surrounding contributor experience and project velocity. And so we've just saw some progress on that. I think that actually also helps with B as well, empower the community to find custom metrics and visualizations. C, work with the steering committee to understand relevant contributor ladder metrics and ensure that they are displayed prominently. Spiffix, are you on?
That's me. What's
It's
up?
Aaron.
Cool. Aaron, sorry.
No worries. I think we should call this like a 1.9 thing. I honestly
Okay.
call.
Cool.
Yeah, and move anything I was signed up for, unfortunately, to 1.9.
All right. I'm going to quickly pop this over. Okay. New suggested metrics towards measuring triage efforts as discussed in the Contribex meeting. Is anybody aware of any movement on this, or should this also be moved over to 1.9?
Yeah, hi. I think it should be moved to 1.9. I
Okay.
have added similar suggestions on the health check document where I think Garrett is collecting all these broader metrics. I just put the link in the chat box.
Okay.
I think it should be get covered there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Second objective, provide contributors a consistent experience across all repositories in the Kubernetes organization, especially kubernetes.github.io and the community repo. The first one is to propagate a standard subset of labels.
Right. So Lucas actually also helped put together a tool to do this, but I believe it is hung up in actually rolling these labels out. And for that, I would have to defer to Garrett.
Okay. And I don't think Garrett is on quite yet.
Right.
Okay. So I will circle back around with him about that.
Okay.
And then also having a consistent definition for handling issues. Sadev?
Yep. Yeah. So, we discussed earlier that the triage guideline we created for Kubernetes repo, that should be applied to all other repos, community and, IO and other related repos, right? But I think we did not have a consistent label across all the repos. So I think this is a little bit dependency over there. But once we have labels consistency, I think we can modify the guideline a little bit. I'll work on it, and sort of we can have it for all the repos.
Okay. Third objective, ensure the org-wide policies are clearly documented and easily discoverable.
Okay, items A and B should be ported to 1.9.
Okay.
C is done.
Woo! Okay.
Let's see. Item D is something I would like to work with Paris on in terms of how to bring in reviewers and what that mentoring process looks like. So that's also going to go over to 1.9.
Okay.
Yes, well, I'm going to work on a much larger mentoring program to get reviewers. Aaron, you will be awesome helping me.
And I don't see George on here either. I think all the HepData folks are off-site, but I believe that the consistent contributing.md and supporting.md across all repos is also a 1.9 thing.
Okay.
Or something we should revisit. Yeah, 1.9. I was just making a noise in SIG release this morning about like de facto punting everything to 1.9, but at the moment I still feel like it's important. Even though it wasn't important enough to do this quarter, it'll totally be important enough to do next quarter. Best practices for reviews. I believe that Sadev and I felt like this was done, and if there's further clarification that has to happen, this will be again, something that Paris will be taking on.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a couple of questions there, so Aaron, we can take it offline. But other than that, yeah, you're right. I mean, it looks, most part it looks good, right? Based on the link you provided earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. 4, promote project health and stability. Define a community-based user support rotation. George, I did not see him on.
He's at an offsite.
Yeah, okay. And then socialize commands for labeling instead of manually applying labels or merging. Garrett isn't on. I'll check back with him on that. Measure Stack Exchange health and office hours. Okay, so I'll check in with George about this later offline. Support the release team, Jago and Jace.
Yeah, the release team job pretty much eliminated my ability to do this. There's something meta about all this, but yeah, let's move that to 1.9.
Okay. I think that is also included in that. Okay, wicked. Thank you guys. And then, so this is the very rough 1.9 planning doc. If you could take a few minutes in the next week and also toss in any ideas that you have for 1.9, we'll be going over it in the next meeting and firming up those plans. And I'll also be cleaning up and organizing this. Okay, and then moving on to the next part of the agenda, the master contributor guide / user journey personas.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Elsie.
Hey.
So I think this is a long time coming right now, just to give everybody a state of current. There are several places that are currently hosting contributor guides / developer guides. So the intention here was to combine most of those and have one place where we can point people to onboard. For instance, the ticket that is in the doc is the start that Paul Morey did, but you'll see from the ticket that there's multiple conversations going on. So the real issue that we need to solve for right now is defining what's the differences between a developer versus a contributor, because both need guides. I think this SIG should own the contributor guide experience, the developer guide, TDA, for kind of who owns what. And it would be great to hear from you all on what kind of like SIG / working group should be around a developer guide. But I actually have Andrew on the call as well from SIG Docs. And the reason why is because this fits nicely within the user journeys that the SIG Docs team is going to do. And Andrew can kind of talk about that in a second from a high level. But we essentially need personas for that. And one of the personas, well, actually, two of the personas will ultimately be developer versus contributor, and then get various checklists and steps based off of that. So right now we're just unpacking all of these terms, coming up with the resources that we already have, again, because they're in multiple spots, whether it's in the DevL section, whether it's in the community section, what have you, wherever it is. So that's the project that we're embarking on right now. We are talking to some of the key players within that issue, I was about to call it a ticket, within that issue. And I would love to, if anybody wants to participate and or help or has content already, that would be great. I think our best MVP right now is just going to be a combined doc from everything that we have, and then we'll kind of see what holes and gaps that we need to move on. And also Paul added inside of that issue, he added a couple bullet points very specific towards like API naming conventions and things like that. So we'll beef up the guide based off of the suggestions that are in that issue. Andrew, did you want to give a kind of like a high level about user personas in case anybody in this group doesn't know what's going on?
Yeah, sure. The TLDR is that we want to sort of customize people's experiences depending on like kind of what their role is or what their specific needs are. So for example, like an app developer doesn't need to know necessarily like cluster operation stuff. So we want to have, specific journeys for them so they can focus on what they need to know for that. And then, so two of the ones that we're talking about here, they, for some reason, are getting conflated. But one is like the code contributors, right, who are contributing to the open source code base. And then the other one seems to be customizing Kubernetes. So they may be like extending the API or adding to it, but it's not contributed back to the community, but it's for their specific project because they need to kind of like beef up the architecture or something for their specific needs. So we're kind of trying to pull those apart right now. And the one that's like code contributor, we're, I guess, here to see like if Contributex is the SIG to kind of own this part or not.
It largely makes sense to me that contributor experience should own the
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about this developer guide piece? I mean, I think someone on the call actually commented on the issue too. I'm sorry, I don't have my browser up right now, but they mentioned that contributor is kind of a top level term. I do agree with that, but at the same time, a developer that's building on top of an API that's not contributing to the community is not a contributor in my eyes. They are a Kubernetes developer, essentially. So, again, unpacking these terms seems to be, and getting some consistency across the board seems to be a key thing, a part of this project, as well as many other projects that I'm seeing. So I think the user journey piece where we're defining these personas is going to water down into many other, many other projects. So I'd love to hear like opinions, and if anybody on the call wants to be added into some of these initial meetings to hash this out. Also, Andrew and I are going to be working on a survey. So if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Kubernetes community members, let us know so we can add it to the survey. But we're trying to aim for under 10 questions so that we can get the best responses. Questions like, what would your persona be considered, or what do you think important personas are to you, in various questions like that. But I think that's it for us. So I guess just at the end of the day, contact us. But also, if anybody has any advice on where this kind of developer guide should lie as far as ownership, let me know so that we can kind of direct Paul and everybody that's interested in doing that piece of the pie into the right spot.
Great. Paris, where would the best place for people to contact you? What would be the best method?
Either Slack or email, parispittman at google.com. I can add that to the meeting notes as well.
Groovy. Thank you. I know that several people need to jump off, so feel free to do so.
I will, but I just want to add one last thing. So I view developer and contributor as sort of a Venn diagram. There's an intersection there. Developer is a subset of contributor, and I care more about that personally, probably from like a SIG testing perspective.
Right.
I think that when it comes to how do I code around the shape of Kubernetes and think about the Kubernetes way, API machinery probably has a lot of guidance to give, and architecture probably has a lot of guidance to give around. So API machinery around like conventions and the Kubernetes shape and way of thinking, and architecture around the appropriate boundaries to define, to place things. And with that, I have to go to burn down. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, I feel like part of the issue is the terminology, because developer is a very overloaded term. Like, 'cause we have basically kind of three flavors, right? There's like an application developer who's using Kubernetes, right? And then there's like a developer who's contributing to the code base, and then there's a developer that's kind of like extending the platform, right? So all of those are developers, but then it means something different when you talk to different people, like, you know, say developer and they're kind of thinking in their context. So I hope, I wish we could also kind of converge on some commonly used terminology that is clear. So when we're saying like this, you know, like code contributor, we know that that's the kind of developer. Because if we just say Kubernetes developer, then people are going to be like, well, which one are you talking about? Or they just assume it's the one that they're used to dealing with.
And just real quick, Patricia, that was me. I added a comment.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, to me, I was just, you know, on one of your comment earlier, to me, it seems like, you know, contributors, like I said, right, it's more top-level term because anybody, right, regardless, they're going to provide any code contribution, like Andrew was just saying, right, they need to know certain things, right, as they got on board, you know, like knowing this, different SIGs, for example, right, you know, or how the project is structured, right. You know, just for them to provide, you know, any contributions, right? Any feedbacks, any user experience or whatnot, right? And then, you know, developers, and one thing I add on like three different categories Andrew mentioned, right? We also consider doc as a code, right? You know, I mean, for many people, they're like, hey, you just doc guy, you know, but then he doc as a code, right? So that, I think that is a developer as well in a way, you know, documentation developer, right?
Yep. And this is in no way taking away from other personas, by the way. There's multiple other personas. I mean, Andrew and I listed out, I think it was like at least 7 personas yesterday. And so just for this project, based on a contributor/developer guide, that's the personas that we're focusing on for this piece. But as Andrew builds out the user journeys, and I don't want to talk for Andrew, but as he builds out the user journeys, we're going to have things like a docs contributor, you know, doc/community contributor, because that is different than, say, you know, this is how you go through a code review process, for example. So, you know, each one of those personas is going to have different checklists and some sharing, some, you know, sharing content, some not. So definitely, 100% agree with you.
Sure. No, thanks. Yeah. This is awesome job. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to the last piece of our agenda. KubeADM-based bootstrapper for Minikube went in, and it is awesome.
We had a discussion a couple months ago about the various intros that people get started with contributing. Get started, they bootstrap, they try local cluster up, or they try Minikube or whatever. And since KubeADM can be used to sort of choose the version, or a more specific version, this is sort of one of the first steps on getting sort of development into Minikube. and it's not that far, but I've had much better luck using the KubeADM bootstrapper than I have had using the local Kube bootstrapper over the past 6 months or so. I require less of the advanced bleeding edge features lately, so it could be partial to that. But again, the local Kube bootstrapper was not working well for me, and this new one, I've been asking for that for a while, and it's gone in, and it's wonderful. So I, suggest giving it a shot if you actually. Not actually, but if you do any kind of development with Minikube, I would suggest trying giving it a shot and seeing. It'll be different because it has RBAC and it has a bunch of the plugins and stuff enabled by default, but it is a closer to holistic Cube experience, in my opinion, than previously.
Thank you, Morgan, for the update. That's awesome. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to speak about? Nope. Okay. Well, I will give you all a couple of minutes back to your morning. Thank you for joining. Please think about what you would like to get done in 1.9 and add it to the doc before Wednesday, before 2 Wednesdays. All right. Have a good morning, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.